Welcome to this video podcast from the Public Relations Society of America's Delaware chapter. In this program, U.S. Senator Chris Coons of Delaware talks about the state of political communications. This program was recorded on Monday, September 10th, 2012, in Christiana, Delaware. Introducing Senator Coons is Spyros Mansavinos, the president of PRSA Delaware.
In 2010, Chris was elected to the United States Senate, where he currently serves on the Energy Committee, Budget Committee, and Foreign Relations Committee. Most recently, in this election season, he's been campaigning around the country on behalf of Democrats, both here in Delaware and around the country. He also, I don't know if anybody watched, there was a convention last week, and Chris was around again on MSNBC, CNBC, and a number of other outlets. He also did something that's quite interesting, and he's going to talk about the Twitter town hall. So that was a unique use of social media, which in a political setting, which we look forward to hearing. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce the United States Senator from Delaware, Chris Coons.
Thank you, Spyros. As all of you know, Spyros is a wonderful and talented communicator and has long been a great and good friend. And he and Megan and the girls have been sources of friendship and encouragement, support, and on occasion, joy for my family and me. At the annual Greek festival, my daughter Maggie, who loves getting out with her dad, often greets Spyros with squeals of delight and says, "Now is good father-daughter spanakopita time." So Spyros is someone who, from literally my very first campaign, has contributed significantly to my sense of how to communicate. So thus, anything that goes right in today's communications, you can credit to him. Anything that goes wrong, you can credit to my ongoing failures as a student to learn at his direction. I'm thrilled to have with me both Meredith Rosenthal and Jim Paoli. If you don't know them, Meredith is my Delaware communications leader, and Jim is my state director. Both folks I've known a long time across many different roles, and I think are well known and well regarded in this community and more broadly. As Spyros mentioned, I've just come back from the Democratic Convention in Charlotte, and as I was sharing with Meredith, it is a remarkable experience. It was my fourth convention. My first convention in 1988, I was working for SB Wu and was very young at the time, and thus had all the energy required to keep up with the constant 16-hour days of running from event to event to event, and the demanding logistics. The changes between my first two conventions and this one were really striking. The second time, I went as an elected delegate in 1996. Third time was in the 2008 convention. And pre and post 9/11, there are dramatic changes in just the physical logistics of a convention because of security. The security in Charlotte was unbelievable. And the number of folks, delegates, senators, party leaders who were not able to get their way onto the floor or to get into meetings or rooms because of screenings and security and so forth was really pretty striking. But in many ways, most importantly, the opportunities given to me in the 2008 convention and now in the 2012 convention as a senator were really quite different than in previous experiences. And as Spyros mentioned, I participated in meetings and interviews with journalists and communicators of a very wide range of backgrounds and types. I was most excited of many different folks that I got to meet with and talk to. I mean, I literally got to have sit-down meetings with the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe and the CEO of Amgen, with folks. And this surprised a number of people when I came back and sort of gave a summary of sort of what happened at the convention. One of the things that is not obvious about a political convention is that, yes, there's a gathering of thousands of elected delegates from all over the country. Yes, virtually every governor, mayor, senator, and congressman in the country is there. And all the political journalists, everybody who covers media and politics is there. But so too are literally thousands of foreign elected officials and reporters. The National Democratic Institute pulls together the opportunity to come and observe both the Tampa and Charlotte conventions with representatives from literally all over the world. So it is one of those moments when the old saying, "the world is watching," is quite literally true. and I had some fascinating interactions with foreign press and with foreign leaders, but also folks whose businesses are going to be affected by the outcome of the election and who are critically interested in decisions that are being made about everything from the fiscal cliff to pharmaceutical regulations, from what sorts of energy policy we might expect out of a next president and a next Congress to what sort of investment we might be making in infrastructure are there. So an unbelievable array of interest groups, individuals, and organizations come together. I think it's a good thing that we only have conventions every 4 years. I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee, and one of the things that's been great about that is to use my previous experience when I was an undergraduate in East Africa and to apply some of my enthusiasm and interest for the developing world to the challenges of the United States' relationship with the rest of the world. But I thought I'd start my brief reflections today on digital media and the current state of political communications by sharing with you what are the top 6 countries in the world. They are by population in order: China, India, Facebook, the United States, Indonesia, Twitter. That was not either true or possible when I went to my first convention in 1988. And it was largely inconceivable at the next convention in 1996. The idea that there are more people actively using Facebook to socially interact with each other than there are residents of the United States is an unthinkable sea change in the power of social networking and of social media. And in a digital age, what Twitter brings, particularly to public relations professionals and to the news cycle, is even more powerful than that. The Twitter town hall that Spiros referred to was an interesting experience. I will be blunt, I frankly struggle with Twitter. Twitter doesn't yet really make sense to me. I'm somewhat, ham-handed as I try to hashtag and and retweet and make up the little tiny URLs. And I am blessed to have a communications director in Ian Koski who really came up through digital media and through really sort of rode the wave of the changes in political campaign communication that occurred as a result of digital media. But it's still not completely comfortable or natural for me. And I'm naturally skeptical. So when I had an opportunity to spend half an hour with Joe Klein of Time Magazine, I was thrilled. I thought this was a great opportunity. Here's someone who I've been reading for years. And I had a somewhat snarky exchange with someone who was supposed to be moving me from event to event to event, who said, "Why did you waste all your time with that guy?" To which my response was, "Are you kidding? That's Joe Klein. He writes for Time." This person said, "Who reads Time anymore?" To which I said, "My mother." There is an interesting challenge, I think, in understanding how communications is changing, in both not overprivileging or underprivileging what is left of the print media of previous generations and who reads what. If my face were surrounded by a red box with Man of the Year on it, not only would my life permanently change, but my mother would finally believe I had done something worth doing in this life. We are in a time when a la carte media, when the opportunities for individuals to get media where they want it, when they want it, from the sources they like and trust, has fundamentally changed political communications. I had the opportunity for the first time to go on the Sean Hannity show. I did a number of Fox interviews and MSNBC interviews. And what was striking to me about the convention was that for the folks who follow politics most closely, it was more interesting or exciting to them that I was doing a Twitter town hall and I was on with Sean Hannity and I was on with Chuck Todd than it would be if I spent half an hour, as I did, with E.J. Dionne, who I consider one of the most thoughtful opinion writers, or with Joe Klein. Why? Because of its immediacy, because of their power, because of their brand. Christine O'Donnell, bluntly, was largely created by the media, by the visibility she got early on with Bill Maher. But in our campaign against each other, Sean Hannity played an absolutely central role. She outraised me 2-to-1. She raised and spent $7 million from an almost dead start. She had literally almost nothing in her campaign account the first week of September. Won a primary mid-September, raised $7 million in 6 weeks. Outraised me by more than 2-to-1, despite, in my view, 10 years of representing 500,000 Delawareans and having a much stronger base, a much broader connection to this state and community and having worked tirelessly for the previous 9 months, calling everyone I've ever met and their friends and begging for money. That, to me, was a very real and very immediate demonstration of the power of targeted cable news, because the vast majority of her contributions came not from Delawareans, but according to her filings, 98% was in contributions of $250 or less from all over the country. A classic sort of narrow-cast national candidacy. And we've recently seen several other candidates be equally successful. In fact, one of the challenges I think Elizabeth Warren faces, she is a candidate for the United States Senate in Massachusetts, seeking to run against Scott Brown. She is far and away the most popular of the current cycle of Senate candidates in the Twitterverse and with the netroots, and has developed a sort of cult status as a Senate candidate nationally. But one of the challenges is she has to be elected in Massachusetts. She has to connect to a state that is much less interested in some of the kind of high finance and progressive politics that I think she has truly mastered, and really want to know, what are you going to do for me here in Worcester, Massachusetts, rather than what are you going to do for the CFPB in Washington once elected. So similarly, I think these are dynamics that are a challenge for candidates. Chasing the dollars, chasing the eyeballs, chasing votes, engaging with the community that you're from. At the end of the day, if I were to give you just one observation about how I think digital media has changed the job of someone who represents you and who works for our community, it's that social networking, social media makes it possible for us to be networked and to interact, to be engaged in ways that were previously inconceivable and that we have to embrace. It has fundamentally changed the job of reporters, and it has given us completely new tools to engage. I do both Twitter town halls and telephone town halls, and have been really struck at the power of these simple applications of new technology to connect with people up and down the state. My senior senator, Tom Carper, who's very capable and very agile and very interested in the substance of governing, has found that telephone town halls are a particularly effective way to reach an older generation that may not be reading Twitter, that is almost certainly not on Facebook, but who's at home at dinner time and at a surprising percentage rate will actually take a phone call, listen to a recorded message saying, Senator Tom Carper is going to be holding a telephone town hall on Medicare and Medicaid. It'll begin in 5 minutes, please hold. When we do this, we can get 1,000 or more Delawareans from up and down the state and get them on and get them asking questions and give them an opportunity to engage directly with their senator, the sort of thing that frankly just wasn't possible previously. The other thing that is really striking to me is how much we can know about the people with whom we're communicating. In those telephone town halls, we get incredibly rich real-time data about who was called, who connected, how long they're staying on, who's disconnecting, and who has responded to which questions. The thing that most impressed me about the Twitter town hall was the Twindex that they unleashed at the Charlotte convention. I'm a data person, trained as a chemist as an undergraduate. I'm always interested in understanding the analytics and the data underlying what we're doing. What was striking to me about Twitter, they were showing graphs that you may well have seen that were used to measure the intensity of enthusiasm, the response to some of the key speeches in Tampa and in Charlotte. Okay, that's interesting. What I didn't realize was how rich that data is real time about the evolution of a public relations crisis. It's great that Bill Clinton can know that there were thousands more tweets at the height of his speech than there were at the height of, say, Mitt Romney's speech. But if you are representing or working for an organization that has to figure out, have we gotten ahead of this? Have we answered the public's questions? Have we really engaged and responded? And is this news cycle behind us? Having a real-time read of what is being said, positively and negatively, about your particular issue and your particular concern on Twitter is a critically valuable tool. That was something I did not previously appreciate. One interesting story I saw from Tom Friedman of the New York Times described how the job of a reporter has fundamentally changed in the digital age roughly this way. At previous conventions, a New York Times reporter would do two things in the course of a day: report and file a story. Oh, and figure out which parties you're going to after that to gather information so you can report the next day on another interesting story. But essentially, a reporter's job was to gather information and write a story, do their reporting job, and then file a story for the written version. He has a story in which he describes the fundamentally different rules, and without going through all of it, it essentially includes Reporting, filing, reporting, filing, reporting, filing, tweeting, 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 updating, 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 and then ultimately filing for the next day's printed paper. In the course of a day, today's reporters are content creators. They are taking pictures of what they're doing, they're shooting video of what they're doing, they're posting tweets of what they're doing, and they are updating to both the website of whether it is a newspaper or a TV station or radio station that they work for. They are updating regularly. They are under dramatically greater demands than ever before to be content creators. So my Senate office, and when I run for re-election in 2014, my campaign, our job is to be content creators every day. And Meredith works tirelessly here in Delaware to make sure that if I happen to be in Washington, there's content being created here in Delaware. That there are events that either my office is represented at or that I manage to contribute to in some way. She takes pictures, posts them to our blog, the blog gets updated, and then the blog gets sent out both through a narrowcast vehicle through emails and updates and e-newsletters to folks who've expressed interest in hearing what I'm doing, and often gets sent out to local press, who will then at times simply take that content and run it directly. She'll shoot video of me speaking or presenting at something, and because it's high quality, that often will get sent to a press outlet, and that may get used for part of a story. If I give a speech on the floor of the Senate, we'll find ways to almost immediately update that and feed that out to folks who then may also capture a screenshot of it or take the entire thing and put that out. What is striking to me is that the diesel-powered, century-old dynamic of Senate office constituent interactions continues. My office sends 5,000 written, mailed letters a month to Delawareans in response to their concerns. But think about the ways their concerns come in. People send me letters, they send me emails, they send me Facebook posts, they send me tweets, and they call on the phone. So one of the things we've tried to do is also update how we send information back in a way that is more immediate and more authentic. Ian Koski, who's my communications director, came up with the idea of correspondence from the commute. I literally take advantage of the fact that I'm sitting on a train 4 hours a day to once a month take a laptop with a little webcam and load up 10 different things, questions that I've gotten from Delawareans by Facebook, by Twitter, by phone, or by written letter, and I just answer them. The first time I did this, I hated it because it struck me as grainy and the sound was bad and the picture's moving like this and, you know, my bald head is shiny, and I mean, the whole thing's bad. I mean, it is not professional video. But apparently that is exactly the point. It conveys a sense of immediacy and authenticity, and for people who have written in asking tough questions, they love that they get an actual unrehearsed answer from me. Because so often, and I've been struck by this, the letters that get sent to my office early on would often say, I know the senator will never see this, but I want him to know blah, blah, blah. So at times, some of the things I will do is literally pick up the phone and call someone who has expressed a concern like that, or append a personal note to the letter going back. Obviously, I can't write personally 5,000 letters a month back to Delawareans. But unlike larger states, when I have taken the phone at the front desk and literally returned calls from people, Delawareans are unsurprised. When folks pick up the phone and I say, hi, this is Senator Chris Coons, your husband called earlier today expressing concern about the debt ceiling, you can tell the Delawareans because they go, oh, yeah, hi, Chris. Oh, he's on the phone. Right? Whereas the other folks who say, what? Excuse me? You are, I say, how long ago did you move here from Jersey? They say, about 6 months ago. Why? As a candidate for the U.S. Senate, sorry, but it's true. As a candidate for the U.S. Senate, I went door knocking dozens of times. My colleagues are stunned by that. The idea that a U.S. Senate candidate would literally go door to door with a county council candidate or state rep candidate or with others is unheard of for the vast majority of our country. Most senators campaign really through TV, in media buys, and through media markets. And new media has made a real difference in how they communicate. It is really the first time they've had anything like the immediacy and intimacy that Delawareans expect. One of the things I keep trying to remind all of us who work together in my office is that Delawareans still expect to see me in person. And even though all this digital makes possible a replication of the kind of intimacy and immediacy you expect. Delaware is still the state where when 50 kids gather in Dover, Delaware on a Saturday morning for their 4-H awards, both senators, the congressman, and the governor all show up. Unheard of in other parts of the country. So I hope these brief reflections have been of some value to you. In my view, you are content creators in a way you've never been before. And in closing, I'm going to urge you to take advantage of the digital tools that I've talked about to recognize that reporters and those who connect on behalf of professional news outlets are under more pressure than ever before. And as you probably know in your gut, the more you help them do their job without crossing that journalistic boundary, the more successful you will be as a public relations professional. And the more you recognize and embrace the fact that folks who care deeply about the institutional organization that you work for and represent are able and willing to get news from you directly, and that you can find ways to narrowcast to them, the more you will also be successful in building that community that in critical times, in times of crisis, will help support you so that the groundswell in Twitter doesn't just all go one way. With that, I'm grateful for the chance, Spiros, to be with you, and I really welcome and will appreciate your clear and tough questions. Thank you.
Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Kate.
You just talked about how, for the first time, you used a webcam to connect directly with voters. And for some of us who maybe aren't in the political realm but are working with leaders, can you describe what your staff said to you to encourage you to take the leap? I know that a lot of these new social media tools can be intimidating for leaders. So what can I say to the leaders I work with to say, it's not that bad, it's not that scary? Give me some inspiration.
You know, you make a great point, Kate, is that for folks who are not themselves, because of their professional role, their occupation, their training, their background, comfortable with the idea that authenticity, vulnerability, accessibility are really the coins of the realm in the digital age, it's pretty hard to accept that they're no longer going to have a podium between them and the viewers, that they're not going to have a tightly written script, and that they're not going to be able to control the interaction. Particularly for corporate leaders, for corporate communicators, they have often engaged in only tightly scripted interactions. Bill Clinton really did fundamentally change communications for leaders and how leadership communications are understood, as did Steve Jobs. I mean, there's many, many others, but those are two that I can just think of where they changed that idea that leadership was suit and tie behind a podium reading from a script, and is instead literally sitting on a stool surrounded 360, taking questions and having more of a coffee klatch conversation. At the end of the day, none of us are going to be communicators as good as Bill Clinton and Steve Jobs, but all of us have to be willing to take the risk of accessibility, authenticity, and immediacy. Frankly, Ian just said, shut up, it's your job. You hired me to tell you to do this, and just do it. And I trust him enough that I did. And I hated it and was unhappy and grumpy and uncomfortable. And you can share with your CEO that they're perfectly welcome to call me about just how grumpy I was. But what folks are looking for is not tight. Americans don't trust communications that are completely clean and tight and scripted. You may find that your corporate leader has to have a setting that is a little more controlled than a webcam jiggling away on Amtrak to bridge the gap. And you may find that the way to sort of ease them into it is a couple of, sit on a stool, you use a handheld webcam, and they talk with 3 or 4 colleagues, co-workers, employees, a community advisory board, but you still have to do a little makeup, you still have to do a little soft lighting, you still have to do a little script. What reassured me, frankly, was that it wasn't live, so I was able to do the whole thing once, look at them and say, wow, that one was awful, that one was awful, let's use these 4, and ease my way into it. I'm no longer involved in making editorial decisions. I simply just turn the thing on and answer every one of them. And as the 2 years that I've been a senator has gone by, I've gotten more and more comfortable with it. In particular, what has made me happier is we then send that video directly to the person who contacted me. And I occasionally get to see their responses. They're stunned, they're thrilled. They can't believe I took the time to not just answer their question, but to post on my website my answer to their question. And we're typically picking questions that lots of people have. And I'm trying to do my best to answer, what do you see as the path forward for Social Security? I mean, these are not safe questions, but they're real questions. They're things that nag at and worry the people I represent, and they deserve an answer. So one of the challenges for your CEO or for whomever any of you work with or represent is to get them to a place of comfort about others doing it. Show them my correspondence from the commute. It's on coons.senate.gov, and tell them that I actually think it's a good idea, even though I look terrible in those interviews. Baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. We can all be taught.
I don't need the mic, but for Steve, I'll do this. Good morning. This is more, I guess, commentary. I can remember maybe 2 years, 3 years ago, I think when you really started to get into the tweet land, that I started to realize that I was getting my Delaware news from you as opposed to reporters. So I really started to follow you, and then I noticed that the reporters started to follow him, because then Rick Jensen on WDEL has you while you're tweeting and you're at a big, I don't know, it was a clean energy event or some other event in Delaware. I'm trying to get information about what's going on at this event, and I'm getting it from the tweets from Chris. So, and then the reporters are calling him and have you live on the telephone talking about your tweets from this event. So it's kind of bizarre. I'm sure that probably doesn't happen as often anymore, because it's not like real news that that politicians are into social media. But do you still get followed and brought to the forefront because of your proficiency in social media with the media?
Yes, thank you. It has made a real difference at times, particularly when there's something that is rapidly evolving, or there's something that is more offbeat, or that may not be sort of broadly followed or covered. One of the other real benefits, frankly, about Twitter, in my view, is that it allows me, when I've published an op-ed or I've done an interview, we'll then push out through Twitter, if you missed my interview with Sean Hannity, because he didn't air it live, but instead chose to only release it on the web, here it is. And then that produces a secondary, if you missed my op-ed on Syria, because initially USA Today only ran it online, they didn't put it in the print edition, it didn't come out through the Wilmington News Journal until a few days later, here it is online. It's striking how there's a secondary poll of people who pick it up that way. I think in some ways the most powerful way that Twitter is being used now is by reporters who use it to keep tabs on what stories are emerging that are worth following. And an artfully crafted tweet can help them to pick up a story or to see an angle on a story that is otherwise being missed. And one of the things that I think makes Delaware very different from other states that my colleagues in the Senate are representing is that we have very little we don't have a major media market that is truly dedicated to Delaware. And so I find Delawareans really value Delaware-specific news. And we have a lot of weekly newspapers or community newspapers that frankly do not have a ton of staff or resources to go do original reporting. So to the extent that Meredith and Ian and others can pitch Delaware stories through Twitter to local outlets, people do really pick it up, because you're right, there's not a lot of, I mean, there are some terrific Delaware reporters and there are some great Delaware news outlets, but it's very different from, for example, the senator from New Jersey or the senator from Illinois. Dick Durbin, for example, will go to the Senate. There is a Senate studio that's open all the time and that has both radio and TV and can do satellite. And he'll go do interviews with 5 different TV stations from upstate and downstate Illinois almost every day. There aren't 5 TV stations that are delivering and developing unique to Delaware news every day. And that's just one of the differences between some of the larger states and smaller states. But thank you for the encouraging reminder that I've done okay on Twitter.
And we're out there.
Now
I have a mic. Chris, your talk was titled "The State of Political Discourse." I'm curious. You've talked a lot about the power of social media and its influence. Most of these talks I go to, I'm told the state of political discourse is at an all-time high in terms of being partisan.
Or an all-time low,
or,
depending
on how you look at it. So I'm wondering how you think that social media either exacerbates that or helps to work through that and allow leaders like you to work together to actually solve problems.
A great question, the answer to which I think is unfolding. I will tell you that actually within the chamber, between members, it is better than I expected. Perhaps it's my Delaware attitude. I have worked very hard to develop real friendships across the aisle. You may have noticed I've introduced a series of bills with folks like Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, a real Tea Party conservative, but who I was able to find common ground with on several different bills on education, on immigration, on helping start small businesses, on a variety of topics. And I was introduced to him by a Delawarean, Adrian Arsht, who'd gone on to be a leader in the Miami community and knew both of us. But it took that personal introduction. Johnny Isaacson of Georgia is ranking minority on the Africa subcommittee, which I chair. And Johnny and I have traveled together, we've worked together. He's a real gentleman. I've come to genuinely appreciate his friendship. It is still possible in the Senate. It is much harder in the House to build real personal relationships. We have a weekly prayer breakfast I make the effort to go to. It is senators only. And every week a different senator stands up and gives real personal reflections about their life and the role of faith in their life. Al Franken is speaking this week. I've heard memorable and remarkable reflections from very conservative Republicans, very liberal Democrats that have helped me gain insight into their personalities. But the constant drive for news and the cloud of folks who are waiting just outside the chamber as we go in and out, and the unscripted and immediate ways in which they take things and spin them, I think contributes to a basically destructive 24-hour news cycle. As a group of us were trying to negotiate to a resolution on cybersecurity, for example, in late July, there was a destructive dynamic, in my view, that every time we stepped out of the offices, the 8 of us got bombarded, and there were people literally tracking who was in and who was out of these meetings. And it was very hard to keep the progress that we were making on track when every member of this working group was under sort of constant pressure to comment. Here's one way I think it is positive. At least I view it as positive. We are now held to account for everything. Depends on your personality and your character, whether you think this is gotcha politics of the worst sort, or whether it is politics where you cannot hide who you really are. You may remember that George Allen's campaign in Virginia was derailed in his race against Jim Webb 6 years ago by his use of a somewhat obscure racial slur, but that because it was captured on a cell phone camera and then blown up into national coverage, this person who may well have harbored and expressed racist sentiments in small settings and in less well-known places got, I think, exposed as having views that were really outside the mainstream. Similarly, Todd Akin is someone who, the candidate in Missouri. Some folks decry the fact that a small misstatement or slip then gets expounded. I don't view it that way. I think in these moments you've gotten a real insight into how those two candidates view folks who are different from them, or how they view women's rights. And on some level, it is a good thing that you have to be the same person every day. There is media around you constantly. What you do, think, and say is documented in a way previously unimaginable. One of the most difficult parts of being a candidate, I will tell you, is having a tracker. The level of intrusiveness of having a young man with a video camera literally following you everywhere you go, into the Wawa, into the Walgreens, in and out of church, every time you leave your driveway, is really quite unnerving. But if you're confident that you're the same person every day and that you say the same thing in every setting, that's not a bad thing. And on some level, it forces us to give the same answers about fiscal spending and priorities and investment in every setting, a discipline that I think politicians of previous generations were unfamiliar with. So I'll close by this. You know, I do a lot of speaking on campuses, high school and college campuses, and one of the things that I challenge them about is they're growing up in a fundamentally different world than ours. I went back to my college. I went to a small college in Western Massachusetts, and for my generation, college reunions, right? You'd go back every 5 years, and it's when you'd find out what everybody was doing and who got married and who's got a child and where you're working. That is an unthinkable challenge for them. They will never be out of touch. From the day they graduate, their class Facebook page will continuously update them on everything, not just their jobs and marriages and children, but, you know, what did you eat last week, and what's your favorite Korean restaurant in Kansas City, and does anybody know a good place to stay in Phuket? I mean, it's unbelievable the depth and immediacy, if they choose to share it, of information. So the college I went to has today a far more diverse, far more engaged, far more opinionated student body than when I was there. And my challenge to them was, if you all can figure out how to actually shape a consensus and how to come to some conclusion out of this cacophony of inputs, then perhaps you can help this group of 100 largely older men figure out how to welcome and embrace the younger and newer voices that I think I and a generation like me that are new to the Senate are bringing, and help us use these tools to actually tap into what is not changed, which is, I think, a fundamental commitment by the American people to inclusion, to tolerance, to consensus, and to progress. With that, thank you very much for a chance to be with you today, and thank you again to Spiros for inviting me.
I'd like to thank again U.S. Senator Chris Coons for taking time this morning to share with us his views. Again, I'd like to welcome everyone here who came to PRSA Delaware. If you're not a member and are interested in joining, please see me or see any other PRSA member. Love to have you join. We will probably have another meeting in October. I'd like to welcome, we have two PRSA members from the University of Delaware here, Chelsea and E. Lindsay. So welcome. So some of our students here. And at this point, I'd like to thank you again and have a great week. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation from the Public Relations Society of America's Delaware chapter. For more information, visit prsadelaware.org. We produce this program in the studios of Lubetkin Global Communications in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, on the web at lubetkin.net. For everyone at PRSA Delaware, this is Steve Lubetkin. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you out there on the net. Take good care.